The next-gen version of Formula 1 2021 is out, and finally we've had a chance to check it out. After PS5's ray tracing features were initially removed from the game around launch and then re-added in recent patches, we now have a fully souped-up release on all formats that deserves attention. It's the latest Ego Engine's first outing on PS5 and Series X and S after all, and with true releases for all these new consoles, there's a few neat extras to talk on here. First up is a toggle for a 4K 60 quality mode, and also a new 120Hz performance mode on PS5 and Series X. How do these modes stack up in frame rate? And is there an advantage on either of these premium machines? And looking back at the older PS4 version of Formula 1 2021, what's going on with the game's ray tracing support in the new edition? To help me out here, I've got Alex joining in our ray traced cockpit. How's it going?
It's going well. I heard there's some rays being traced here. Perhaps. We'll take a look. And I'm excited to talk about F1 2021.
Yeah, 2021. This is fairly light on new stuff as far as the content goes, I'd say. But with that being said, there is one major addition in terms of the raw sort of features, which is campaign mode. They call it Breaking Point, and it's kind of a cute idea. You take this young F1 driver or F2 driver who's made big waves there, and it's about his rise in the F1. And, we both had a look at this, and they've got some CG pre-rendered cutscenes, nothing in engine, which is a shame from our perspective.
Which is a shame from a rendering perspective. But, you understand it for a game like this where they spend all their rendering time, usually on cars, It makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So you can't really hold it against it. But yeah, besides that, I mean, we had fun, watching these cutscenes because the lips are kind of a little bit uncanny.
Yeah, they're a little odd, I've seen for sure better looking CG pre-rendered characters before, getting that uncanny valley look right here, but only so much. You can't really fault them. It's a Formula 1 game after all.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be the focus. The focus, I think, for us really is, shall we kick off with the description of the modes? So we've got obviously the 4K 60 quality mode, as they call it, which really is an upgrade on the last gen way it was displayed. This is a true 3840 by 2160, temporal anti-aliasing as ever, a potential of DRS. I know the PC has a toggle for it there, but from what I've seen, every frame I've checked, really intensive sort of races with rain and 19 AI cars up ahead. It's not dropping from 4K as far as I've seen anyway. So, it looks like the real deal.
That does make a lot of sense because, if we look at these next-gen versions in comparison to, say, the Xbox One X version, which was using, I believe, checkerboarded 4K to get up to its resolution, the gen-on-gen upgrade in GPU performance does actually make sense that these could possibly be 3840 by 2160 at nearly all times without really great evidence of DRS in play. It does make sense.
So that is the quality mode, and I think 4K 60 is pretty impressive on its own, but they went a little bit further as well. They've got a performance mode as well, which is 120 Hz, and they confirmed ahead of time it's 1440p. We actually took captures of the game at 1080p, but with some very close pixel counting, you can confirm 1440p on both sides here. So
how about Series S in that quality and performance mode? What is that looking like?
So Series S only has the quality mode, so no extra mode. We've seen 120 Hz on Series S before, but this time it didn't make the grade. It's 1080p though, 1080p 60 in the standard one.
That's reasonable. A little bit of a shame that there's no 120 Hz mode, because maybe it could do it, but perhaps like we've seen in other 120 Hz modes on the Series S, maybe it would be dropping to visual quality or resolution levels that the developer is just not comfortable with.
Yeah, there's got to be a compromise somewhere, doesn't there? Maybe it would have been 720p, 900p, who knows. But so in actual comparisons between all three, we'll focus on PS5 and Series X for this bit. There's nothing between them. It's 4K 60. They've got the same settings. They've got the draw distances, all that. There wasn't much between the last gen versions in their comparisons, Pro and One X, and same again here. There's one discrepancy I did notice when we're panning across the Monaco marina. There's shadows on PS5 at a greater range, but that's really it. I couldn't pass anything else from these two. And Series S also falls in line with the feature set of Series X, so nothing much there. But I guess the main reason we're both here and both excited for this version is the fact that ray tracing was confirmed and is actually a feature on the next-gen consoles.
This one's kind of interesting because I've been following the PC version for a while right now, and they recently just added in a variety of modes. Initially, it launched with just like a single monolithic ray tracing option. Then they upgraded it to have essentially like a medium, a high, and an ultra high mode. So I've been following that and the performance, specifically as covered by Computer Base, which is a wonderful website. Everyone should go there, check them out. They do amazing benchmark work. Essentially, what I noticed is that it is pretty expensive to turn on ray tracing in this game at ultra high resolutions. Like on a RTX 3080, it's just above 60 FPS, it's like around 70 FPS according to the benchmarks on Computer Base. So I was genuinely surprised to hear that it would be on at 4K on the next gen consoles and running at 60 FPS or targeting 60 FPS, but it seems like it's not actually there all the time, right, Tom?
It does seem to be conditional, doesn't it? At least from what we've compared, we've got the PS4 app running on a PS5 here. Both sides of this comparison are running on a PS5. Left side is PS4 back compat, and right is, of course, the native PS5 version, taking advantage of the hardware. So, in principle, we should be seeing the differences with the ray tracing additions. And what you'll notice is, of course, as you said, PC has the reflections and shadows as individual toggles. The PS5 version shows strong signs of both, but only in the pre-race cutscenes, the build-up moments, and around the cockpit.
Exactly.
When it comes to like the flybys over the Monaco stage, the marina, you'll see like the reflections around the ships are fully formed. They don't leave like a gap between the water body and the ship. It's actually
the ship itself.
Yeah, it's actually proper high quality reflection.
And then you also get like what looks to be the ray trace shadows as well in these scenes. You can see the very, in comparison to the shadow maps on the PlayStation 4 version, for example, they're just like much more crisp and they don't break down and have like a cascade line going through them.
Yes.
But, one thing we noticed when you go over to gameplay, the PlayStation 4 back compat app and the PlayStation 5 one, they look feature set wise in terms of having ray trace shadows or not, or having RT shadows or not, pretty much the exact same.
Yeah.
In that one aspect. So it seems like they are indeed only using ray tracing both on the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X version in only these kind of pre-race areas and conditions. But the gameplay itself seems to be straight up normal rasterized techniques. In fact, I know you and I were just looking at it. Even the cube maps on the cars, those seem to update still at half rate or so on the 4K quality mode. So it's like 30 FPS reflections using an old style technique in the normal gameplay. It's a little bit of a shame, but honestly, based upon what we've seen in the PC version, it makes a lot of sense. The ray tracing is really expensive, and they would have to have not been targeting 4K 60 to make that realistic.
Yeah, I think it's very telling when we ride down this straight on the Monaco stage. They have that cascade for shadows all across the buildings up front. You can see it slowly roll out. And likewise, the reflections on the car body update at different junctures. It isn't what you'd expect of a ray trace technique, but
no,
we do get that. I mean, this is the 60 FPS, rendering of the game. When we're in the cockpit before the race, when we have the flybys, the pre-race build-up, that's all 30. So it does make sense that they've, maybe targeted these flourishes, the ray tracing for moments where you'll probably appreciate it more. And when you're in the heat of a race, I'd argue you're not really going to see it quite as much, at the speed these races go by. I don't think it's too much of a loss.
Yeah, it's also not surprising. Racing games all the time have like the pre-race sequences or replays, for example, turning on higher quality settings. It's not surprising. I mean, Gran Turismo's done it for a long time, for example. This is just another example of that. The only thing that I only find a tiny bit of a shame is that I do think ray trace reflections on cars look pretty awesome usually. So missing that in gameplay is a little bit of a shame, but the ray trace shadows, that's just cream on top of an already nice cake. It's not super required for a game like this.
I love the way the shadows appear in the cockpit, especially. It gives it that inky black, really realistically cast shadows across the hands here and across the steering wheel. So it does make a big difference there.
Also, it looks like Series S, at least in these flyby moments like on Monaco that we were just talking about earlier, or the pre-race moments, also seems to benefit from ray tracing. Is that correct?
It seems to. Like, it's a match in feature set for the pre-race bits. The reflection method is the same, so you can deduce from that. Okay, and it's 30 FPS as well, so this was...
Sounds realistic.
Yeah, it sounds realistic. There is a bit of an interesting wrinkle to all this when we get to performance, which I guess we can go to now.
Yeah, this is true.
Okay, so quick fire summary really is... you remember PS4 Pro and One X, they were pretty much perfect 60 at the resolutions they chose. And the same goes for PS5, as we've seen here, and moving over to Series X as well. 4K 60, not a problem whatsoever. I think it's not to focus on the negatives at all, but it's interesting to see that, while the pre-race bits are 30 and the gameplay 60. When you go to an instant replay, and notably on Series X, I've noticed PS5 is better at this, but Series X doesn't cap the frame rate.
So weird.
Yeah, it's really weird. So you can see, like, suddenly after going from 60, you can bail out of a race and it'll suddenly drop to 30s with heavy tearing. And there's not really an obvious reason why, but maybe, just maybe, there's an extra boost in effects settings, maybe ray tracing as well, just added in. It's very curious.
It is very curious, especially the fact that it's tearing the entire time. that seems like a big oversight. I don't think that's at all intended behavior. Perhaps it's just not engaging the VSync or the half refresh rate VSync that it should be doing in such moments. So maybe we're seeing like the equivalent of a benchmark of the game running with ray tracing. It's a little bit hard to tell, but it's curious behavior for sure. But how is the 60 FPS mode then, or the only mode on Series S? Is that hold up in a very similar manner?
Very similar, yeah. I think 1080p is a very conservative target, or at least around that number is what comes up in most pixel tests, and it is perfect again. And, bear in mind, it's 1080p without any signs of reconstruction, as we saw on the Xbox One version.
So one other thing that you mentioned earlier is the 120 hertz mode. We only have the 1080p capture of this 1440p mode on both the PS5 and Xbox Series X. Does it hold up as well as that 68 hertz mode at all?
It really does. Honestly, it's absolutely flawless. And
that's fantastic.
Yeah, you can push it in all sorts of ways, but I think 1440p 120 is a really good tight balance. Again, no signs of reconstruction on this feed, and it seems to be native 1440p. Really great addition. As you know, driving games benefit the most from this mode.
Immensely. First-person shooters and driving games, they benefit so much from 120 hertz, just like, especially at the speeds that Formula One cars go. That 8.33 millisecond frame is so much more close in terms of spatial movement when you're going down these really fast lanes and stuff. It makes a huge difference for turning, for example. It's a big deal.
Yeah, it's a huge deal. And that said, if I'm nitpicking, I did notice a little bit of tearing, one or two torn frames at one point on the Monaco stage. Shock horror, but that's it.
Wow, my goodness.
I just thought, that's not really worth dwelling on too much. 99.9% of the time, not an issue whatsoever. I think we can be very happy with this.
Nice.
I think there's one last little note here, which is that there's been some oddness with the patching on PS5. Right now there's no 3D audio support. They patched that out, and the notes on EA's website say as much. And that they're trying to fix an issue with the audio there. I'm pretty confident it'll be back. They did the same with ray tracing on PS5 as well. It was just like gone on one patch, then reinstated on the next. Some teething issues there.
Yeah, maybe the version just came in slightly hot for some reason. There's Corona times. It's hard to fault a studio to launching so many versions of a game, and it's not that easy.
And I think it's worth stressing that it is their first stab at a next gen F1 game. So this is really the first step. We'll see more with the next year's edition, I'm sure. Something that invests a bit more deeply into what these consoles can do. But for now, really solid turnout. 4K 60, 120 hertz as well if you want it. Ray tracing, they've dabbled with it, and it seems to pay off in moments where you can notice it. So very impressed.
Yeah, very cool. Maybe the next iteration will have it on in gameplay. We'll see, but I think that's as much as we can really say about these versions at the moment. What do you say, Tom?
Yeah, besides that, that's all I've got on this one. Thanks so much for joining me on this, Alex.
Of course there, Tom.
And we'll do our round out here. If you did enjoy this video, feel free to like or subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell to get notifications as any new video lands. We've got our archive of high quality videos on our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net, and much more in terms of extras there if you subscribe. Of course, if you want to get in touch with any of us, just use Twitter. But from Alex and myself, goodbye for now.